And we are live. This is season 2, conversation number 19. And today we have Dr. Anupama Kylash as a guest today. These conversations are brought to you by the Vaggeyakara Institute for Leadership Development, which is a unit of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. These conversations hope to bring speakers and people from a wide range of backgrounds and spanning topics of development, social issues, leadership and education, culture, heritage, and much more. Today we will be speaking with Anupama on the Dharma of Art, perspectives, paradigms, and prospects. Before I start, let me introduce Anupama to you. Dr. Anupama Kylash is a senior practitioner of Indian dance and an academic with a PhD in dance from the University of Hyderabad. She has given over 1,000 performances and lecture demonstrations spanning 10 countries and has over 60 paper presentations and workshops to her credit on subjects ranging from aesthetics, poetics, Itihasa, Kavya, Nataka, Prabandha, Vaggeyakara, literature and imagery in Abhinaya. She has authored 2 books on the works of Annamacharya and Kshetrayya and projects from the Department of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Culture, University Grants Commission, and the Central Sangeet Natak Akademi. Anupama also founded the Anubhav Center for Performing Arts and Literature in the year 2000 and has conceived, curated, and presented many events under this banner, the most popular being the Thinking Capsules. She currently serves as Professor for Kuchipudi Dance in the University of Silicon Andhra, California, and also as a guest faculty and member of the advisory board for the newly launched University Rasa Rishi, affiliated to the Kannada University, Hampi. Thank you, Anupama, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, since the topic is about the Dharma of dance, this is something that we spoke about before we actually thought of the topic, and we said it's something that we need to unpack even as we speak. It's not something that we've thought through. So let me start with that question. So, is there a Dharma to dance at all? And if yes, what would that be?
Yeah, so there is definitely a Dharma to dance. So that's an affirmative. Yeah. So I want to start with the idea of, when we are talking about Dharma of Art, basically that's what we said in our subject.
Correct.
So when we talk about the Dharma of Art, I want to start with this, observation that actually, if you look at the concept of art is actually a construct. It's completely artificial. It's artificial in every way. Like, for example, if you're looking at the rising sun, that's nature. That's not art. But when the same idea is, maybe used through a palette of colors, described through a palette of colors, or it's described in notes, or it's described, through literature, through words. When it is articulated, that's when it becomes art. So basically what you're doing is, it's the wonder here, and something that's been under debate for, if you ask me, decades now, amongst, people in the field of the arts, is a series of falsehoods. Art is nothing but a series of falsehoods, which actually reveals to you suddenly at some point the truth. So that is what is interesting about it, because, and it's with this idea of, a completely nature versus culture, or Prakriti versus Samskriti. This has been discussed, to no end, actually, if you ask me, because the idea here is that something is being revealed to you through this medium called art. And that something is a kind of an interrogation or an understanding of the concept of truth. And that is being done through a series of falsehoods. So this was an idea that was discussed a lot even by Abhinaya Gupta and by, later, some of the later rhetoricians like Bhattanayaka, when they brought out this concept called Sadharanikarana, or universalization of, human emotions. So
if I may just step in a little there. And,
sure.
Because when you said Sadharanikarana, because I actually use the Sadharanikarana model To also teach communication
Management, I
models,
know, yes.
communication
Yes.
management as part
Yes.
of the. But the reason I wanted to interject is, I have a bad thing with memory. I forget. You said from falsehood to truth, but it's the typical construct of dharma has been from a lesser truth to a higher truth. That
Yeah.
it
So
moves
what
from
I mean by
perfection to.
falsehood is basically what I'm saying is that it is altered reality. It is not everything that you see there is completely a construct. It is not something natural. It is a construct. And from altered reality, you're actually going into reality. So this is the reason why people even shun the idea of culture, because or art, because it demands two things from you. One is that the word Abhinaya, if you look at the word Abhinaya actually etymologically, if you look at the word, it means coming face to face and leading. So Abhi is Abhimukham, we say, coming face to face, and Naya is the root term for anything which is leadership. Nayaka, Nayika. So Naya or Nayak is to lead. So you come face to face with them and you lead them wherever you want to take them, or wherever you think you want to take them. So basically, when you do that, what you're doing is you're creating an altered reality. It is not really, the existing reality, but it's a way to negotiate reality. Because people are not really capable of looking at reality like that without a filter. Art kind of provides that filter. It kind of provides you the modus operandi or the medium to negotiate reality in several ways. It's also an escape. See, it also demands that you submit your intellect outside and then come. It also demands that from you. Because if you are looking at a very, very high quality art, you cannot really address it with your intellect. You'll have to put that aside and come. So there are multiple ways to address and understand reality. And I think art is one of those mediums, one of those very brilliant mediums which were devised by the human mind to be able to look at and understand reality through a filter, basically. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah.
You are, but you're also, throwing up a lot of questions as well. So when you're talking of reality, I'm assuming that you're talking of the absolute reality in absolute terms, right? I mean,
different types of reality, anything. For example, if you're looking at the temple context. So if we are looking at a context of the temple and we're looking at the context where, there is the idea of the agama, something is prescribed. And you're saying, Geetam, Nrutyam, Vadyam, everything, all Samarpayami. And then you have to, like if you have, for example, a Brahmotsavam that's going on and you're dancing a Devata Avana.
So nowadays, what it is, for everything, we substitute with Akshata. For Geetam, Nrutyam and all of that.
Yeah. Everything is only, I know. So you're not really having any of these components in the worship today.
Right.
But when you look at the idea, see, suppose you're saying there is a Devatavhanam ritual going on, and you're saying that a certain god likes a certain raga or a certain god likes a certain tala. And you have to submit that to them. So if the temple dancer, excuse me, of the yesteryears, what would she do? She would dance nritta there. She would dance pure dance.
Right.
So what is she? She becomes the conduit here to bring in the higher powers and connect it to the social, to the earthly powers. So this conduit is usually she dances nritta or pure dance, because if you take on a character, then you are filling yourself with another identity.
Right.
But if you dance only pure dance or you dance nritta, basically you become a host. You're emptying yourself. You're emptying yourself and you become a host to receive whatever is coming.
Right.
So when you want to face that reality on this level, on the earthly level, this dancer becomes the conduit. She becomes the conduit to bring this idea down. Now, that is what I meant, negotiating reality. And that's what people like Kapila Vatsyan and so many of the others have spoken about when they speak about squaring the circle.
Right.
So whenever they talk about that concept, they talk about how you bring the forces down through different mediums. Now, in different contexts, this idea takes on different connotations. So when we say dharma, if you look at the temple, it takes on a completely different connotation of the temple dancer being a conduit for the higher energies. But when you look at the Raja Asthanas, the context completely changes. This is a formal court proceedings that is going on. So the structure and the dharma of the artist becomes completely different there. It follows a certain different kind of a protocol, because that's a formal kacheri.
Right. So you unpacked so many things, and I can definitely follow the thread of what you're saying. I can see it, because all said and done, I am invested in all of these things.
Yes.
But you don't really see everyone else understanding it or relating to it like you've actually related it now. Right? I mean, that's the conundrum that most people are faced with, in the sense that they come there because they want to be entertained, whether you like it or not, right? So that's the end. That's all that people want. So in that sense, when there are several artists, I'm just making a segue here, where there are several artists who have, for lack of a better word, started to cater to the lowest common denominator in terms of providing only entertainment and not, offering it like you've just unpacked it, because this is a beautiful expression of the very purpose of this one. So I can understand that. But so what do you have to say about this? Is this a kind of compromise that is required for the times, or is it something that or is this also a part of the multiple realities that you're talking of?
So yeah, I was actually coming to that.
Right.
So what I am trying to say is that when you look at what the Natya Shastra says, also it says Loka Vrittanukaranam Natyam. The Natya imitates the actions of the world. Now, when I say dharma, I don't only mean in the context of something divine or the divine conduit. Dharma at every level and in every context keeps shifting. Now, the same Rajasthana, let us look at the court traditions. Now, the same thing in the Telugu land. Let me speak about the Telugu land. So you used to have, this set of performances which were called Mezuvani. Mezuvani means chamber concerts.
Right.
It comes from the Persian word mezban, which means to host.
Yeah.
So these Mezuvani concerts were generally hosted by the prince, the Samsthana head, the princely states. He will have a few very important dignitaries. And then the Devadasi, I mean, that word was actually not prevalent there, but any of them, the Patra, the dancer, the Kalavantulu, any of these dancers would be asked to give a very intimate chamber concert to that set of people. Now, at that point of time, you're talking to a very elite connoisseur kind of an audience. You're talking to a primarily male audience. You're talking to a kind of audience who's come there to be entertained and receive pleasure in a very aesthetic manner. Now, at that point, the dharma of the dancer is not to be a divine conduit. Right. She has to give them what they want from that whole situation. That becomes her dharma at that time. Now, just like the dharma of the courtesan. The dharma of the courtesans, we come from a land of Kama Shastra. So we know very well what is required of them at that point of time. So the dharma in every context, in that particular context, when it retains its maturity of expression, that becomes the dharma of that context. So when you look at a Mezuvani performance, it will be primarily Shringara-based javalis, it will be padams and pieces like that, which stimulate the sensual idea. That becomes your dharma at that point of time. That is what you're required to do. And that is what you're doing with extreme finesse, and grace. So that is the perfect dharma for that point of time. Just as in street theater, just as in Ata Bhagavatam, you have to entertain the masses who have gathered there in the, in the street corners to watch your Vidhi Nataka, to watch your street play. So you have to entertain them. At the same time, this becomes an infotainment kind of a thing.
Right.
That you are entertaining them at the same time, you're also acquainting them with the idea of the Puranas. You're also bringing in, Puranic lore, you're bringing in socio-political, cultural, ideas there. You're weaving all this together and presenting it in a most entertaining manner. So I think fulfilling whatever is the requirement of that particular context is as much dharma. So I think that's as much of a dharma to, when you look at the various contexts in which it evolves. What I'm saying is, at least, today, from the context that we have, from the vantage point that we have, I think we have to look at each of these dharmas independently and non-judgmentally. I think that's very important for us to be able to look at each of them very non-judgmentally.
Right. I think there's a question that's come up in the chat which is relevant to the what we've been discussing right now. It says, so does that mean you should perform and pick your compositions, its details and layers based on the type of audience?
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. I think you need to do that. And also, something, of course, in a later question, I'm sure you'll be asking me about that, about the changing contexts, and what is the requirement. So, yeah, Divya, I'm sure you do need to pick your pieces. See, we have to be aware of 3 C's: the context, the content, and the core. These 3 are very important according to me. To understand what is the context in which a particular poet has written a particular work. And when you pick that up for interpretation, how are you analyzing that piece based on its context, content, and its, the core reading of the piece? So here is where, there has to be multi-layered, confrontation with the truth. You can't, say everything is divine, because it's as human as it's divine. So we have to understand the context of that. Anyway, I'm sure Ramesh is going to come up with some questions regarding that.
Yeah, I'm going to, but I'm also, Rama just messaged me saying that she has a question that's pertinent to the current Dharma discussion that we're having, and it's going to be a lengthy question. So I'm just unmuted. Rama, go ahead.
Yeah, Namaskaram Akka. Thank you so much, Ramesh. Sorry to interrupt this. Namaskaram Akka. You're talking about dharma in arts per se, but of what I have understood from your explanation right now, how I perceive it is dharma related to each of the contexts. In the examples that you have given, you have first spoken about the dancer as a conduit in terms of the agamas that were carried out in the temple traditions, where the dancer per se becomes a conduit and kind of transfers on that particular energy or whatever that is received from the other side of the divinity to the people who are who are actually carrying on the proceeding. Yes. And parallelly, you also talk about the dharma of an artist, of a courtesan or of a rajanartaki, in the space of a chamber concert or in the courts of the king. And now you just recently touched about also the concept of how dharma is shifting. It is constantly changing based on these contexts. And Ramesh very interestingly mentioned about how, the whole purpose is actually dharma, but has it come down to entertainment? In my limited understanding of the Natya Shastra, of what I have heard from my teachers, Natya Shastra also very easily say, interestingly says that art is meant for entertainment. Now, the connotation of entertainment is very different of how we understand it right now.
Right.
But when, at the time of the recording of Natya Shastra, the entertainment was basically to give a certain kind of a santosha to a mind, because there were a lot of people who were actually in very deep spiritual paths, and to kind of ease their mind,
Right.
Sangeetam, Vadyam, Nrityam was, was a part of it. So the connotation of entertainment in my question is this entertainment. Now, when we come to the current time, we do understand that we are not in any of these contexts at all. The entire context has shifted. And the audience who are coming to watch us are also not the kind of audience that the Natya Shastra prescribes, or even the Agamas prescribe.
Right.
So wherein, if then the art were to actually be, performed or shown or shared as a form of an entertainment, do you believe that the dharma has been completely reduced? Because dharma in essence means that the art that has been handed over to us through the parampara or through the teaching, through the pedagogy, paying complete adherence to the structure, to the dictats of the idiom, and to what the poet in the composition has chosen to has chosen to say that this is how you have to portray, and using the grammar of the idiom, when all these are actually followed, considering that it is followed by the practitioner.
If they are capable of following it, yes.
If they are capable of following, which to a large extent we are, considering that we are within that structure and that. So do you think there is no dharma there, or do you think the concept of dharma has been completely overseen?
So Rama, I understand and appreciate this question, but I also feel that there is no simplistic answer to it. Because I think that there is a lot of, for example, I think I'm eating into the next question of Ramesh if I answer this, question. So basically the idea here is that when you do, I totally agree with you. If you're going with the dictats of a certain context, then you're fulfilling the dharma of that context as it was understood then. And then if you're going with another context, you're doing that also. So basically what you're saying is that, are we not adhering to dharma at all today in any way? That's what you're saying, right, Rama?
She's become muted again, because that automatically gets muted once.
Okay. Yeah. So see, that is what I'm saying when I say that I don't know if the methodology of dharma that we can practice today in the given context, for me, the given context is something which is divorced from mainstream life. This context could be practiced because art was part of mainstream life. Today, art is in a capsule. It's not part, your life is something else, and then you practice art. It's not part of your life. It is not part of the way you live. So for example, so many of the students who come to us, they are software engineers, they're doing something, and they're also dancing. So in that context, it becomes very difficult to actually adhere to dharma as we have understood in the various contexts that I mentioned. But the only thing we can do, I think, today is that I will not make a sweeping statement and say, no, we are not going by the dharma of art at all today. I won't say that, but I think the way we are able to practice it at a very basic level is very, very subjective. I don't think we can practice it the way it was practiced then, because we do not have the tools, we do not have the methodology, and we do not have the resources to be able to practice it in that way. That is what I'm saying, basically. So I don't know, Ramesh, if it makes sense, so.
I think this is very, very similar to, I think this is very similar to what the kind of debates that we seem to be having with around the Dharma Shastras as well. How should we be changing them based on Desha Kala and all of those things, kind of things? I don't know. I'm just seeing it like that from that context. So
No, it is to
yeah.
a great extent that context also. See, because today, even in the dancing community, we have two extreme viewpoints now. You have one viewpoint where one section of people want to look at every piece of literature as something which has a divine connotation. Then there is one section of people who completely want to deny the divine connotation and say, why are we uncomfortable with human emotions? Why can't we just look at it as something that doesn't have an unnecessary philosophical connotation? Why can't we just enjoy the human emotions portrayed? So what I'm saying is both ideas need to be tempered, for us to understand the thing. Like if you look at a poet like Annamacharya, you cannot deny the philosophical connotation there because it is definitely there in the context. But you look at another composer called Sarangapani, where he talks about the patron and the customer and the courtesan relationship. So there is one song in which the senior courtesan is asking the younger courtesan, what have you done? He has paid you in, lead, not in gold. And he has left. So how did you take this? This is what the senior courtesan is asking the younger courtesan. Now, in such a song, you cannot force fit it into the divine connotation and say, no, just because Sarangapani uses the, Makutam of Rajagopala, then this is Krishna of the Bhagavatam, this is Krishna of the, Bhagavad Gita that we are talking about. It is not. It is a direct patron, customer and courtesan relationship that you're talking about. It is simply poetic convention for us that you use Rajagopala, Mugagopala, Venugopala in whatever you're writing. There it becomes just a poetic convention. But you take a poet like Annamacharya, you cannot deny the absolute, philosophical content, or you cannot deny the philosophical content of the Alvars. So I think that is where the discrimination, it's either this, where you want to force fit everything into the divine, blueprint, or you want to force fit everything into the, it is this thing that is, kind of dividing us.
I think I asked the question and we stirred the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got about 25 minutes now into it and we've not moved beyond question one. So I know there are several other questions. I also have, Anita, I texted her also asking if it's a question that she can put into the chat, because I really need to move on to, subjects that are,
Sure, of course.
Yeah, so I think let me just go to let me do a little bit of a segue so that we come out of this in terms of where. So the newer generation that's coming in, people who come and learn from you, or the people you seem to teach, and other things. I see some of these newer performances. To me, to the untrained eye, to somebody who's really doesn't know anything about classical dance and all, it looks like all of these are more fusion dances, for lack of a better word, rather than the classical dance that we've come to understand, see, realize, appreciate, and all of that. Not that this is not appreciated, but just that this looks, kind of with all the jing bang of the newer fusion and all of that. So how do you see this? And also, I'll just roll another question into it. Why is it that when I speak to youngsters, most of them say that dance is only a hobby. It's not a pursuit in itself, and I'm assuming that it used to be a pursuit in itself for an earlier generation. So you have to.
Yeah. So I think we'll do the second question first. The why it's not a pursuit in itself is like, I think it's almost evident why it is, because it's not a lucrative profession. So you cannot really earn anything through dance. We have, unfortunately, our social structure has failed us, where the arts is concerned. You cannot make art a career and at the same time, be able to earn sufficiently enough for you and your family. There are people who are earning through the arts, I agree. People who have schools maybe, or now with so many institutions, you have people who are working in these institutions and all of that. But basically, when you compare it with the other professions, you really do not, it's not a very lucrative profession. So the whole problem is that there is no, I am not one of those who would like to keep crying and saying that, there's no patronage for the arts and things like that, but it is a fact. It is the truth. See, when you look at the sabhas of the yesteryears, when you look at the idea of the poets and the artists, these were official, like the ministers, these were official counterparts of the king's sabha. All the artist had to do was concentrate on his art and be fantastic at it and execute the art, and they would be looked after. But today, you don't have that situation. This is also the problem when the Devadasi system came to an end. There was a very beautiful article which spoke about, how their path from the courts to the proscenium stage was not really considered. People didn't think of what are these women going to do, something that was their profession. Suddenly, when it's all taken away from you, what are you going to do about it? The transitions that we have made into modern urban society, somewhere the social structure has failed the arts. So it is not a lucrative profession. So how do you take it up? So that is my answer to the second question. It's very simple that, had it been as, did it have the structure to be self-dependent, probably more and more people would have taken it up.
But the whole point of something being a pursuit in itself is that, for lack of a better word, money shouldn't matter, right? I mean, if you're doing it for the sake of, not for Natyam's sake and
I
all
think
that. I understand. It sounds very, it's very utopian in its outlook, but and I understand that you brought the realities of. But I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I think 90% of the dancers today who have taken dance as their profession are doing Natyam for Natyam's sake only. There are so many dancers here sitting. I think they all know, how little they can earn through dance. So those who are actually committed to it and those who are absolutely fine with, dance for art for art's sake or dance for dance sake, I think that is what they're doing. Right. They're doing. But what I'm saying is it's not a natural outcome. It is not a natural outcome. You study a certain subject and you get a job in it or something and it pays you. So there is one, a direct proportion to the whole idea, which was there, which was in existence in society at one time. The artists owned a lot of property. They were looked after by the state. So they could concentrate just on, being great artists. But we don't have it today. We don't have it. So they are forced to go into something else. And those who are taken it up completely, in spite, you have to do it in spite of it not being very lucrative. So those who have taken it up, there are some who are really earning well through their schools. But there are some who are, just doing it because they're mad and they love to dance and they want to do it. So they're just simply doing it for that. That is a reality. That we cannot, it's not an altered reality. We can't negotiate that reality. That is something that is true. Yeah. So your earlier question was about the kind of dance we see today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So see, I don't want to judge, but I have only two things that I want to say here. One is that if you look at some of the maestros of the yesteryears, I think you remember even you and I had a phone conversation also about this idea of how they danced and what was their intent when they danced. The intent was that you dance to create the maximum aesthetic, pleasure. You dance. So there was no this gymnastics or there was no necessity to show very acrobatic movement. There was many who used to do it. There were many who used to do it also, but even that was couched in a certain purpose. But, like if you look at the choreographies of the very senior, the old Kuchipudi maestros who used to also choreograph for cinema, you have some very, very, acrobatic movements even there. But the method of execution, and when you see the stage, on the stages, on the proscenium stage, when you see, if you would see a Pandit Birju Maharaj, or you would see a Bala Saraswati dancing, there is something, what Kathak dancers will know this word, there is something called a Tehrav. There was something called a very contained energy. The energy that you put there was in sync with what you're doing. The energy was not like eyeball grabbing kind of an energy. But today there seems to be some problem, as far as, even in Rama's post, I remember we were talking about certain very simplistic, interesting narratives like the Shabdams. They are not appealing to dancers anymore because they feel it is too simple. It is not too complicated. It doesn't give you the scope to do, extremely complex nritta or extremely convoluted body movement. So they are this has become very, very, very pronounced in what we see in today's dancing. And I also won't deny that there is a huge audience for that also. There is a huge audience for that. That is why people are doing it. I remember somebody telling me once that in the Madras music season, there was this discussion between some dancers about how many piroots you can take. And in Bharatanatyam, we don't even have pirooting. But the idea of, when you take a circle, will I take one, will I take two, or can I manage to take three in the same given amount of time? So this is just a little disturbing because, rather than concentrating on the content of what you're doing or what is the import, what is its, what is the beauty, what is the silence, in the noise. Instead of concentrating on that, you're more bothered about the body dynamic. So it's becoming very body oriented. That is the only thing, but, I will not say anything more on this.
Right. There is also a disagreement with you. It's come through the chat on the use of the word falsehood. And Anita wants to respectfully disagree. I just want to add to that. I think when you said falsehood, I understand it as being not as an altered reality is what I understood.
Yeah. Okay, Anita, I will. Yeah. Okay, let's replace the word falsehood.
But I made the connect between this and that's.
So when I'm saying falsehood, I'm not saying lie. I'm saying I'm not saying it's a lie. What I'm saying is that it is a series of something that you are affecting. That is what I'm trying to say. It is affected. That is my idea here. Yeah, Anita, you're on mute. So do we unmute or should we continue, and shall we go back to this discussion towards the end?
Yeah, towards the end, what I'll do is that there are at least 2 or 3 people who want to, come in. So I'll let them come.
Anita, we'll go back to this towards the end.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I think the chat is also quite fairly, when you spoke about gymnastics, I was also thinking of a relative of mine who's a very famous teacher of yoga who used to say that all that is being done now is not yoga and actually gymnastics. So, and
I think all of us in the arts feel that about, even musicians feel that.
Right.
Even musicians feel that what they're hearing today is more gymnastics rather than a very nice and gradual development of the raga. So I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, there is also this point being made that it's not just about the monetary aspects, but it's also about the social perceptions, as in the negative perceptions that seem to attach itself to the performative sort of dance. I think
I agree. That is also there. Yes, definitely.
Then there's also I think a person is talking about the plight of the folk artists.
Oh yeah, that is a completely different discussion. Folk artists are absolutely in the doldrums. So Yeah.
They seem to have fallen through the cracks in the.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All indigenous forms have just, that is an absolute reality.
Okay, so the other point that I wanted to this one is, one of the things that we wanted to discuss at length was, so how is this Natyam is different? Because again, I'm again the asking this as a layman. How is Natyam different from dance, as we know it,
Okay.
and how does Natyam seen in the context of a performative piece, fit into the larger canvas of the Natya Shastram itself?
Yeah, so actually the word Natyam today, if you look at a Telugu person, he will say Natyam Adutundi. So, Natyam is being used,
Yeah. Right, I understood. Yeah.
Yeah, so Natyam Chestunaru means, they're dancing basically.
Yeah, it's a sarcastic way of saying, yeah.
No, it's not sarcastic. They think the word Natya actually means dance.
Oh, no, there is also, they also use it sarcastically where they mean
that is a different thing. But
right,
the word Natya has been, it's kind of, a lot of people think Natya means dance. But since you're talking about the Natya Shastra, the context of Natya is basically theater.
Right.
Natya means theater. So when you say Natya Shastra, you're talking about the Shastra of dramaturgy. See, because we didn't have this concept of specialization almost till the 11th century, almost till the 10th, 11th century. I think to the end of Abhinavagupta era only. It is only after that you had certain specific texts written for Nritya, which is primarily for dance. But before that, dance, music, instrument was all part of the Natya traditions or the theatrical traditions. So when you look at Natya Shastra, you're basically looking at theater. And to a great extent, this applied to Sangeetam also almost till the 13th century. Till the Sangeeta Ratnakara came of Sharangadeva, where he clearly mentions it, that he says, Geetam, Vagyam, Tatha Nrityam, Trayam Sangeetam Uchyate. So he says three of them together, Geetam, Vagyam and Nrityam together constitute this word called Sangeetam. But today Sangeetam means music. So this is a demarcation, it's a specialization that has evolved later. But when you look at the idea of Natya, basically Natya is theatrical activity. And in the context of theatrical activity, music, movement, Hastabhinaya, everything played its own role in the context of dramaturgy. So that was the original connotation of the word Natya.
Okay, I got that. I'm just going to come back to the, in a sense, to the first section of what we spoke about as we wind it down towards the end. And we're going to be, unmuting at least a couple of them. Anita has wanted one, and I think Rama had something to add as well. So I just wanted this dance now, as seen through now we seem to use the generic term dance. So, but if it's seen through the Bharatiya lens, dance is not just the Western concept of, it goes beyond the Western concept of communication, motion, emotion, all of that.
Yes.
So in that sense, how is dance, the Bharatiya dance, different from dance in that sense? And why is this difference important? I think that's something that not many people seem to be getting, because there's this.
Yeah. So this was something that, we teach a course called the kinesthetics and psychic component of Indian dance. So in that course, when we talk about the idea of dance, as we looked at, in the context of the word as defined in Oxford Dictionary or somewhere, it simply says, a series of movements executed in rhythm.
Right. Correct.
And you are moving to a certain rhythmic thing, and you're just, you're moving your body. It's basically a locomotion idea, and you're moving, and you're to a certain rhythmic structure. That is what is called dance. Now, but that is, that is not how we have viewed the concept. See, because it has evolved largely from, as we said, from the context of the earth and from the context of birth. So these are two, connotations that we have when we look at the evolution of the dancing activity, in in the Bharatiya context, as you said. So if we look at the evolution from the earth or the evolution from the ritual, like for example, see, this is a very long discussion. That is why I'm not able to, say it in a very short manner. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you look at the context as something that comes from the ritual idea, even the common rituals, like say the ritual of the Janapada Kalyanis, the rituals of the Basavis, the rituals of the, Joginis. So these were all tribal mothers, dancers, soothsayers, fortune tellers, who were connected to the idea of measuring of the earth and understanding and regulating processes of life on the earth. This was all done through song and dance as a medium. Now, this comes back to my original argument, is that in the Bharatiya context, understanding reality and negotiating reality was always done through art. This comes back to my original premise there.
Not necessarily,
To a great extent. Right? No, not only through art. I didn't say only, but it's done largely through art. But see, this is because also, like for example, you look at when music or literary activity became propagatory in nature, say when Bhakti movement came, it took on a propagatory connotation. There was the need to revive Hinduism in its, in its very, in a big way. At such a time, music and dance were resorted to. You had music as a medium. You had music as a medium to express the idea of change on multiple levels. Now, this is where it differs from the idea of dance. What I'm trying to say is that in the West, to a great extent, if you see the idea of synchrony, form, and structure, as you have in the Western concept, they looked at social change and they looked at the idea either from the point of view of rebelling against it. So you create the art form to rebel against the establishment, or you incorporate certain elements of it. For us, the context was always to harmonize. So if you want to look at it from in one sentence, if we want to understand this, from the Bharatiya context, it is always you use art to harmonize dissonance on multiple levels. It was always used as a harmonizing agent. You are trying to bring it to the common man in a harmonized way. I think that is a very important context for us in the Bharatiya arts. That is why the theory of rasa, that is why you have this concept, which is very different from the Western idea of aesthetics. So when we look at Alankara Shastra in the Indian context, or aesthetics in the Indian context, which is primarily the study of rasa, it is very, very different from the way aesthetics is looked at in the Western context. So when you look at this idea of creating rasa, it is basically, no matter what you do in which context, our idea is that the journey should be internal. It is not an external journey, it's an internal journey. And that is the context of the art here. That is the Bharatiya idea of the art, is that you have to reconcile with what they are calling the Hridaya Akasha. Or even the Sadharanikaran idea is to meet the universal truth through this whole conundrum of action, emotion, and everything. It is to come face to face with that. So here what you're doing is you're not inviting the spectator to be a viewer. You are inviting, in Bharatiya art, you're inviting the spectator to be a participant in the entire activity, not a viewer, not somebody who looks at what you're doing, but somebody who's with you, who's a participant in the whole process.
I think this, dovetails very well with the Vedic, or what Aurobindo calls Satyam Ritam Brihat, that the Satyam, the truth, and the the expanse, that is Brihat, that is so big, is intimately connected with the Ritha. And most of our things that we do, Vrata or Rutukala, all of these things, even the English word rhythm comes from Rita. It's all drawn from the same word. So the whole purpose of, and rituals also comes from Rita. So the whole purpose of a ritual is to align yourself with the Rita, that is the harmony that is already existing in eternal, in the universe. And you make that connect, and then you make the connect between the Satyam and the absolute Brihat, which is the expansive truth.
See, even in
reality.
See, like for example, in the Telugu, if you look at the tribal goddesses, some of the rituals that go on. So when you have the in the village goddess fairs, when you have them, there is one ritual which is called Rangam Ekkadam. It's called Rangam Ekkadam. So that is you mount the forum, or you mount the dais. And this is done by the tribal mother.
Ekkadam, okay. Right.
Ekkadam is to climb, mount. To mount.
I heard it as Ekkada. Where? Okay, so.
No, not Ekkada. Ekkadam.
Ekkadam.
So this ritual is called Rangam Ekkadam. Literally, if you translate it, that is what becomes Arangetram.
Right.
In Tamil. So the idea is you go on there to resolve something. There is something that you are going to resolve there. And if you see the order of the items that you see in Bharatanatyam also, right from Alaripu, the unfurling, right from that, if you see the whole idea, it's very interesting actually, the trajectory of how you can understand this. But it's a very long discussion, unfortunately. It's a very, very long discussion. The trajectory of how we can understand this, how we can resolve this, how we resolve the idea of rasa, and the idea of dancing in the modern context. It's a large subject which we just cannot cover in few sentences.
Yeah, I think we have about. So, Anita, do you still have something to share? Let me. You'll get a message asking unmute yourself. Just a minute. Right.
Am I good?
Yeah, Anita, we can hear.
Okay. Namaste, everybody. And thank you, Rameshji, for giving me this opportunity to talk to my very dear friend, Anupama. So, we were talking about, there are two things actually. Number one, you said, for us, dancing is very internal. We internalize it. And I'm going to say that so do a Western classical dancer. They do, which is why they are so disciplined in body, because they don't have Abhinaya the way we do, and everything they express has to be done by the physical body.
By the body, yeah. I know.
So it is tremendously challenging, and some of my closest friends work 5 to 6 hours a day, and I don't see that so much in our traditions. So it's not to say one is good or one is bad, but everybody is trying to get to that one indivisible whole. That is the foundational principle of our entire.
I'll just interrupt once, Anita, here. Basically, what I'm trying to say is what Ramesh was trying to say is that, what we see even in the studies of Kapilaji and others, that for us, the honing of the form is basically to transcend the form.
Absolutely.
That's how it was. That is how it is. So that's basically what the point I'm trying to make there.
But in essence, both are same. The classical traditions are all same in essence.
I'm not. Yeah. Okay. Let's think that they are the same. Okay.
Yeah, they are absolutely the same. In essence, everybody is striving for that. We articulate it very differently. It's like the languages we speak. We articulate it differently, but the essence is very much the same.
True. Actually, for me, I have a problem with the word classical itself.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole debate.
Yeah, from there.
That's a whole debate.
We'll have to start the debate from there.
I'm just trying to segregate it from, say, disco dancing.
Yeah. I know. I get what you're saying.
Or something else. But I don't know. Maybe a professional disco dancer is also working towards it. I don't know. So,
Right.
So one of the things is, when I said about falsehood, I understand you're not meaning that it is untrue or false. I got that. But everything about life, because by our knowledge systems itself, it's so abstract. The philosophy that drives the entire matrix of knowledge system is so abstract. If we did not objectify it, if we did not take auspicious...
That is exactly what I meant. That is exactly what I meant,
Yeah, but
actually.
the term falsehood is a misnomer.
Okay, let's remove falsehood. Let's remove the word falsehood.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
let's remove the word.
I
Let's
agree.
just call it altered reality. Okay, just let's call it an altered reality.
This is this is very similar to the argument that is made for the to explain the Maya of the Advaita.
Yes.
Where sometimes people say
Yes.
it is a falsehood when actually it's not a falsehood.
Yeah, see, because it also depends on your inclination. See, because I'm a Vaishnava, and since I believe in the, I go with the Ramanuja's theory.
Right.
For me, I will say the rope is also true, the snake is also true. Every emotion that is connected to both of them is also true. So whatever.
And to concede the point, I think most people relate better to Vasishtha Advaita than to Advaita, simply for the reason that absolute Advaita is only experiential and is not at all practicable in that sense, and therefore you find it difficult to relate to. You can get to that state of Advaita, and once you get to the state of Advaita, how do you even, because the moment you start attaching gunas,
yeah,
I mean, you cannot describe the abstract. The abstract by its very nature should be nirguna, and
yes,
yeah. So therefore, that's the conundrum that most people face when they try to.
I agree. Yes,
yeah, describe.
absolutely.
And therefore, I always say that though I come from the Shankara school, I say that most of us start off as Dvaitins, probably graduate to Vasishtha Dvaitins, and then perhaps at some point in time, maybe we'll drop into the ocean of Advaita if at all.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that when they talk about Advaita not giving any importance to the theology part of it. So there is a description that it uses all these as stepping stones to the idea.
Right.
So yeah, that's what is interesting there.
But yeah, that's a separate debate altogether. Because I have even Advaita, I don't think is by its very nature doesn't talk of only the abstract.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so,
yes. And it's a question of loss in translation that's happened typically.
Yes.
Which is fairly common. So I just have time for one. I had this one, since you also teach at two schools. The new NEP, the National Education Policy, talks of integrating dance, culture, and all of these things into mainstream education. Essentially, if you look at NEP, it talks about having this great balance between the left brain and the right brain, that mainstreaming of art, and making it very easy for students to move from the science stream into the art stream, and the art stream into the science stream. Something that at a policy level it speaks of at great length, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
So policy is only what is said, and getting it done. So what do you think needs to be done? Is this something that can be done? Do you think you see this as playing out at some point in time, or do you think it's only
see, at different points of time? I mean, I don't know much about what is the new NEP, but about 6 years back or 7 years back, when the CBSE wanted to incorporate dance as a part of their curriculum, I also remember writing the Kuchipudi syllabus for that particular endeavor, which was taken up by the Delhi University at that time, in collaboration with whichever government was there. So I think the main thing that went wrong, it didn't really work, to be very honest. The idea of incorporating dance forms or a study of a dance form in 11th and 12th class for CBSE, or even 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th also, didn't really pan out. It didn't really work well. Now, I have my very personal opinion on that. I feel that if you are going to integrate the arts, dance, or any music or anything as a part of the common core curriculum, where, as you said, where students of technology also should be able to take this up, or they should be able to study it, understand it. I think for this, if we are going to go with this idea of Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Kathak, Odissi, Kathakali, it will not work. I don't think it will work if you go by a dance style or a dance system. I think it will go only, it will work only if you make people understand movement as an idea. Make them understand how movement, the kinesthetics of movement, the idea of movement, how that can enhance your own understanding of a subject. You know, I think it's the kinesthetics approach that will make it work. Because why will somebody doing electronic engineering, it's impossible for them to come now and learn Bharatanatyam for 2 years there in that thing. It becomes, the moment you ascribe a certain structure to it, which is something that has evolved and for which you need like years and years and decades of training to even get to the basic level. If you put it like that, then it's not going to work. You're going to put them off. In fact, there is a very good friend of mine who's doing his PhD on this, understanding movement so that it can be applicable universally. You know, dance for everybody. Dance for everybody. You know, translating the idea of dance for everybody in such a way that tomorrow, you know, if Ramesh Venkatraman wants to come and dance, he should be able to. You know, he should be able to come there and understand.
That's probably going to happen if an artificial intelligence chip gets fixed.
That, of course, yeah. With AI,
because I have two left legs, so I have two left feet rather. So
yeah, it's like me having two left hands, which is why I'm always amazed at Rama's columns. So yeah, so I think it has to be, you know, you have to basically give them the idea and the concept and the dynamic of movement. I think that is the only way this is going to work. You know, tell them where the source is coming from, and there is research going on this. I know this because a very good friend of mine is actually working on how do you translate this thing called dance in such a way that everybody can be not a viewer of the arts, but can participate in it, can be a performer of the arts. So I think the system, you can't say, okay, we will teach you Bharatanatyam, we will teach you Odissi, Kuchipudi. I don't think that will work. That will not work.
I don't think that is the plan as well. But yeah, I get.
That's what I said. I don't know what the plan is. Like, what exactly are they? How would they plan to incorporate it? Is what we need to see. I think deeper.
I don't think there is I think the idea is that, you know, people get to know the fundamentals. I think it comes from the idea that they want everyone to have a grounding in Bharatiyata, to put it like that.
You know,
and in that sense,
to be very honest, that also has its own dangers,
right?
And it also has its own pitfalls in the context of dance. See, because you don't want them stuffed with only, you know, some legendary anecdotal origins of the dance forms.
Right.
You don't want this typical, you know, NCERT textbook kind of understanding where you say, okay, Siddhendra Yogi created this form, and, you know, this is fallen out of the foot of Nataraja. This is not what is required, you know. So there's a danger in that also.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, at which we probably need to, you know, when I started this conversation, people told me that, you know, 1 hour is a very long time. You won't have so much. You won't have. You know, there won't be enough for you to speak for about. I'm realizing increasingly that, you know, we hardly, you know, scratch the surface when we speak for about 60 minutes.
No, and also see, because there will be another problem with this whole thing is it's so subjective. These understandings are extremely subjective when it comes to art. So, you know, the way I look at it, or the way Rama looks at it, or the way Anita looks at it, or the way Divya looks at it, there is always going to be something which is my version of the truth here. There's always going to be that with the art.
And that is in the nature of the, you know, the dharmic tradition of our country.
Yes, absolutely.
each experience has to be subjective. It's not an experimental thing. It's about that's the reason why no one has been able to come back and say this is the experience that you would go through when you actually realize the truth. Because the moment they realize the truth, they cannot speak about it. They can only soak in its grandeur and not be able to express it in words, and therefore the absolute seems to be, and therefore it's the infinite. I mean, that's the
absolutely. So that is what I meant, when of course Anita took exception to the word falsehood, but but that is what I meant when I spoke about this idea, is that it's a soft lens for you to understand and negotiate truth. That's what I meant when I said that. And that is what they have, spoken about in the universalization principle also. Even in that idea is how people of different temperaments, people of different thoughts, people of different processes can come to one place and experience the same thing, identically at a certain moment in time. That's it. Only at a certain moment in time. And that is a very fleeting moment. So I think that is the beauty of art.
I think so. We've actually run over the 60-minute time limit that we had.
Yes.
And there's so much more to discuss, but all good things have to come to an end. So is there, if Mr. Sudarshan or Dr. Rekha want to share anything, I can, if they want to, I can ask them to. But if there's nothing, I think this is, I must take this opportunity to thank Anupama, having taken the time out to share her thoughts. I mean, the whole idea is that the whole idea of this conversation series itself is that people come share their thoughts. It's not about finding solutions. The whole idea of a conversation is to to the extent possible push the envelope in terms of each topic and other things. So we are 19 conversations into this. We did about 53 last year and only focused on education. So it's been an absolute pleasure and thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope all who joined us also enjoyed it.
Just one thing, if there are any other questions there, if you could just read them to me, maybe we could discuss them at a later date.
Right. I can't see any questions, but I do see comments. One minute.
Yeah.
Somebody says it's actually available CBSE these days. I know someone who's doing maths, physics, chemistry, and Kuchipudi as their subjects.
I know, yeah.
Okay, so that is one. The beauty of art is that each of us has our own reality.
Yeah.
I think somebody is also saying, thank you for starting this conversation, tip of the iceberg. Really very important set of. I think there was one question that talked about. It says, can you please explain the measuring activities of the yoginis a little more?
Oh, that's I don't think we have time to do that, because if you look at the whole, a lot of the hastas that actually come from measuring units. They come from farming. So that is a completely different discussion. And there is also a connection between the idea of ma, the term ma being a measuring unit, ma being Lakshmi, so there are connections between all these concepts also. So it's not really something we have time to go into right now.
Right.
So maybe a little late, some other time.
Sure. So I want to thank everyone who's come again. We continue. A recording of this conversation would be posted on our YouTube channel. So you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. There are about 60, 70 videos already there on multiple conversations. It's a very simple, you just have to go V-lead, V-lead. That's the channel that where this will be, and I'll share the link. So thank you, Anupama. It's been an absolute pleasure to speaking with you.
Thank you, Ramesh. I know we have a lot more that we could have kind of spoken about, but yeah, it's been very interesting and great set of people here who have also participated in the whole thing. Thank you so much for having me over.
Not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you everyone for coming over. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did bringing it to you. So thank you. Have a great weekend, what's left of it, and then have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.